All right, let's look at number 19 now. In a right triangle, one angle measures x degrees, where sine of x equals 4 over 5. What is cosine of 90 minus x? So before we could answer this question, let's just make sure we know what sine, cosine, tangent mean. So this was acronym you may have learned in your geometry class, SOHCAHTOA. And let me just write out what this means real quick. That means given some angle in a right triangle, the sine of x, it would be the opposite side over my hypotenuse. The cosine of that angle would be the adjacent side over the hypotenuse. That's an h, by the way. And then finally, my tangent would be the opposite side over the adjacent. So how does it look like in a triangle, in an actual triangle? So then in a triangle here, where this is clearly a right triangle, and let's say this side was x, and let's say this angle over here was, I don't know, alpha for angle. If I wanted to figure out what is this angle here, I could take the sine of this angle and take the opposite side of the hypotenuse. The cosine of it would be the adjacent side over the hypotenuse, and the tangent would be the opposite side over the adjacent. Awesome. So in our question, they give us some measure angle here. Some angle measures x. In that case, sine of x is 4 over 5. So sine is my opposite side of x. So this will be 4 over my hypotenuse, which would be 5. What is the cosine now of 90 degrees minus x? What does that mean? Well, what do we know about a triangle? We know that if I was to add up all the angles, so alpha plus x plus 90 equals 180. If I was to add up all the angles in this right triangle here, I would get 180 degrees, because that's just the sum of the interior angles of a triangle. Well, what is this angle measure? How about this? Looking at this formula, let's solve for alpha. So let's subtract 90 degrees from both sides. That's a bad 90. So that's alpha plus x equals 90. And since we're just solving for alpha, let's just subtract x, get alpha by itself. Perfect. So basically, instead of saying alpha, we can now say 90 degrees minus x, which makes sense. That's just another way you can find angles within a triangle. So how does that help us? Well, now the question now the question kind of does it for itself. We have the question basically asking, what is the cosine of alpha? Or, what is the cosine of 90 minus x? We saw that alpha can be rewritten as 90 minus x, which is just 90 degrees minus this angle x. So what is the cosine of this angle here? Well, cosine refers to the adjacent side over my hypotenuse. So adjacent means right next to, so 4 over hypotenuse, which is 5. The answer to this question is actually just 4 over 5. I believe this is called the complementary angle relationship. So if I was to take the sine of x, that's equal to the cosine of 90 minus x. Now, looking at the final question on non-calculated portion of this exam, number 20. If a equals 5 times the square root of 2 and 2a equals the square root of 2x, what is the value of x? So, looking at this equation that we wrote here, 2a equals square root of 2x. What is x? Thankfully, they gave us the value of a. So let me just rewrite this now with the value of a. 2 times all this value of a. Awesome. Let's just solve for x. I'm going to simplify my left-hand side first. So 2 times 5 square root of 2. Don't complicate that too much. It's actually just 10. square root of 2. And that equals the square root of 2x. So this is a very handy exercise to do for algebra. Whenever you have a square root and you want to, I guess, solve for the inside of that square root or just try to eliminate the square root, one thing you can do is just take the square of both sides, so just square both sides. The reasoning behind that goes into the law of exponents, which you touched on in Algebra 1 or Pre-Cal. But what that allows us to do is to, let's say, quote-unquote, eliminate the square root, which gives us just 2x on the right-hand side. But what this does for this left-hand side, I'll write it out a little bit more explicitly over here. This becomes 10 square root of 2 times 10 square root of 2. We can now do this as 10 times 10, and then times square root of 2 times square root of 2. What is 10 times 10? That is 100. Ooh, what is the square root of 2 times the square root of 2? And you don't have a calculator on this section. Again, that goes to the law of exponents, which the square root can be written as 1/2. Essentially, again, quote unquote, the square roots cancel. So the square root of 2 times the square root of 2, that equals just 2. So 10 square root of 2, this left-hand side here, that squared is just 100 times 2. If you want to, you could think about distributing this 2 here, the square term, but this now becomes kind of algebra 1 at this point, or even just 8th grade math. 100 times 2 is 200. 200 equals 2x. Now solve for x by dividing both sides by 2. Therefore, x equals 100.